The Shoreline 1102 by MakioKuta. What happens after you die? A question asked and avoided by millions of people on a daily basis. No matter how much time passes, no matter how many empires rise and fall, the question remains ever present. People's answers arrive like snowflakes, varied, changing, and compounding. When one person is convinced they know the truth, 20 people are there to pick their truth apart. Me, I can't really say what happens. Maybe I'm a little more informed than the average person, but my nightly brushes with the dead are just a tiny, insignificant corner of a bigger picture. I certainly can't speak for the entirety of the realm of the dead. What I can do is take care of my little corner. A job, sure, but recently, I guess I've been thinking about it as something more than that. Death comes for us all. But if there's no correct answer for what happens when it does, who's to say I'm handling it wrong? I'm still doing my job, fulfilling quotas, meeting deadlines, just like the higher-ups want. But no one pays attention to the graveyard shift, and when the souls come clamoring, begging for someone to listen, you don't always have to follow what they say in the training manuals. Instead, you can turn the microphones to them and let them have their last words. Good evening, everyone. You're listening to 1102 The Shoreline. I'm your host. Hello to our longtime listeners and welcome to any new ones. Thank you for tuning in. The closing bars of the song quietly dissolve into the background as I queue up the next piece. Although my coffee has long since gone cold, I take a sip, letting the caffeine invigorate me for the last few hours of my shift. The gentle buzz of the surrounding electronics hum in their approval. The music washes over me as I lean back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My work isn't particularly exciting or glamorous. The shift I chose to work even less so. It's usually shoved onto the newest of newbies, but I volunteered for it. And somehow, confusingly, that single decision changed everything. For the better, for the worse, I'm not sure yet. Perhaps I'll never be sure. Soon enough, I'm left in the silence as another song fades into the ether. I right myself in my chair. A quick glance at the clock on my laptop confirms what I already knew. It's time. It's your host once again, listeners. I hope you've been enjoying our selection of songs tonight. I flick a series of switches and buttons on the audio panel. The sharp noises ring only for a second, any reverb swallowed by the acoustic panels of the booth. The air shifts. Warm flips with cold. We've reached that time in the show where we take some callers. I flick a few more switches, the room starts to hum with energy. Now listeners, it's important to remember that if we can't take your call tonight, there's no need to fret. Have patience, you'll get your turn. We all do. Through my headphones, I hear a familiar crackle of static, energy pushing against an invisible and immovable barrier. My finger hover above the slider I have yet to touch on the audio panel. After all, what does time mean to the dead? I move the slider all the way to the top. The sounds of thousands of overlapping voices surge through my headphones, each vying for my attention. Whispers of lives lived, regrets held, passions unfulfilled, a cacophony of humanity. I close my eyes, filtering through them in rapid succession. Thousands of images flash in my mind, all begging to be lingered on longer than the fraction of a second I afford them. There's new ones tonight, just like every night. Some souls speak louder, expecting it to get my attention. Others peddle their tragedy. However, I've been doing this long enough. They can't show me despair I haven't seen before. As I continue filtering through the noise, a familiar presence makes itself known, not demanding my attention, but asking if I can spare it. Warm, kind, bumbling, a soul I've spoken with before. I move down a slider on the audio panel. In a rush, the multitude is thrown into silence. In its place, there's only one familiar soul left. I open my eyes to the booth. Tonight, we welcome John Jameson back to the show. How are you doing, John? There's a pause as John adjusts to being pulled forcibly from the ocean of souls. Over my headphones, I hear him mime the act of breathing. It's a habit that the dead are slow to lose. Are you there, John? Oh, yes, I'm here. Sorry about that. The wife keeps telling me my hearing is going. She got me these fancy hearing aids, but I keep losing the darn things. You do remember what we discussed last time, correct? You've passed away? Now that you mention it, that's right. Like the wife always says, I'd lose my head if it wasn't screwed on. I choose not to belabor the point that the dead require neither hearing aids or heads. Now, John, as we discussed previously, the point of the show is to give the dead a final platform to tell their story so they feel ready to move on to the next step of the afterlife. I pause, allowing the import of my words to sink into the moment. Do you have anything you wish to share? I do. You mentioning that last time, son, but like I said then, I certainly can't think of anything important I might have to share. I had a lovely wife, a fulfilling job, beautiful children who grew into capable, well-adjusted adults. If we're talking regrets, when I was a kiddo, I certainly had big hopes and dreams. Wanted to be a star basketball player. Worked hard all through middle school and into high school. Of course, those dreams were dashed when it turned out I was the shortest boy in my class. I was even shorter than some of the girls. Oh, how they teased me for it. But if I hadn't stopped growing, I never would have moved away from my hometown, met my beautiful wife. And when I say she's beautiful, ooh-wee, let me tell you. That's right. This was why I was putting off taking his calls for so long. It's not unusual to find ghosts that aren't sure what's keeping them in purgatory, but it doesn't make my job a little trickier. You can never quite guess what it's going to be. Fears, regrets, grudges, ambitions. What seems mundane to you could be a single chain keeping a soul bound, unwilling or unable to move on of their own accord. Of course, a soul doesn't have to choose to leave for them to move on to the next step. I could send him on his way, forcibly severing the petty human concerns that bind him to purgatory. It would it wouldn't be against policy. It's considered the most efficient way to handle souls. However, I know from experience I'll get an earful from one particular person if I take the easy way out. Sorry to cut in, but perhaps I can help. His rambling comes to an abrupt halt. When he speaks again, his voice is as chipper as it was before. He seems the unflappable sort. Help? Well now, usually I'm the one doing the helping, but I guess an old man like can take lessons from a kiddo every now and then. So, what you have in mind, champ? He's treating this like a friendly chat, so maybe I should take a more casual approach. Why don't you tell me about family? How about your family? You've mentioned them both today and when you called before. Ah, don't you know what to say to charm an old man? I wish they let you take photos with you to the afterlife, and that I could show them off through the radio. Not only would you be proud of them by the end of my speech, all the listeners would be too. He stops for a moment to laugh at his own joke. By my count, it's the last 10 seconds straight. Despite the chatter landmine I suspect I'm about to step on, I push forward with my question. What makes you so proud of them? What's not to be proud of? My oldest, Kelsey, just gave birth to her second son while still working on her doctorate. Let me tell you, nothing slows that girl down. And Evan? He just got the senior position at the firm that he's been chasing for years. All those long nights are finally paying off for him. But don't you think for a second that I've forgotten about Lucy? That girl could order breakfast in at least 10 languages and not even break a sweat. Why, just recently she started learning Polish. That's one of the toughest languages for an outsider to learn, I hear. But she's flying through it. Well, at least I figure she is. Don't rightly know, seeing as I don't speak Polish myself. And my wife? She's the most supportive and sweetest thing you'll ever met. But she's got fire. Give her even the slightest chance and she'll both knit and drink you under the table. He stops to laugh again, and the whirlwind of speech coming to an end. I'm glad he hasn't figured out he no longer needs to breathe. I don't think I could get a word in if he realized that. Although, if they were truly that successful. Sounds like they had busy lives. Perhaps you wished you could have seen them more? Well, of course! I couldn't have seen them every day, and not even that would have been enough. Not gonna lie, I do miss them dearly. It's sad to think I'll never get to see them again. So, in the end, you do wish you could have spent more time with them. You're not wrong. But I could have lived 10 times longer and I still would want more time with them when I eventually died. It's not easy leaving your family behind. His voice hitches in a weird way, like it's tripping over something in his throat. His tone's still cheery, but it's clear he's forcing what once came naturally. I've spoken with enough souls to know what that tone could potentially indicate. You love them. More than words could say, kiddo. more than words could say. I see. Love is an incredibly powerful source that can act as an anchor, not only in life, but in death. If the love he has for his family truly is beyond words, even for someone like him, it's certainly possible that's what's preventing him from moving on. Maybe I'll ask him about something else. Why don't you tell me about friends? You've spoken about your family previously, but what about your friends? Surely you had some good friends. When you live as long as I did, you're bound to make a good friend. The wife and I used to move around a lot when the kids were younger. But when I retired, we settled down. There was this lovely little community garden that my wife and I were lucky enough to snag a plot in. Do you garden much, host? Can't say I do. You gotta give it a go if you're given a chance. That's where I met all the closest friends I made in late in life. You'll find all sorts there, and everyone is so enthusiastic to share their knowledge with you. Some years, the yield, the better than others. But the company was always good. At the end of the season, we'd have a big old potluck, using the vegetables we'd grown. Let me tell you, potato salad made with potatoes you grew yourself is something else. Do you have a favorite veggie? Mine is cucumbers. You can make all kinds of stuff with them. Vegetables? What? Why? Rutabagas. Oh, what an interesting answer. Can't say I've ever had a rutabaga myself. What do you like about them? The taste, the versatility, the texture? The sudden barrage of questions throws me off. Truthfully, I just had answered the first vegetable I could think of. I've never had a rutabaga either. I noisily clear my throat, sparing me a few moments to collect my thoughts. I think we're steering a bit off topic, John. Right. You were asking about my friends. Anyways, my wife is my greatest friend, and don't go telling me it's a cliche, cause I already know. But you won't get a different answer after me, no matter how much you ask. If you're looking for outside the family, I made friends with all the people at the community garden. Even got most of them calling me Cramps before too long. Some of the ladies who were older than me even started calling me that. You must have missed them, right? Well, of course. But I know they'll all take care of each other. And my wife as both our gardening friends and the kids. I know they'll take good care of her now that I'm gone. Perhaps you could have had a chance to thank them for all they've done. I said thank you as much as I could during life. But you're not wrong. I'd love to thank them for caring for my wife. Of course, that's a thank you that'll be a bit odd to give while you're still alive and kicking, so I never really had a chance. I see. He's right about that most people don't verbalize thank you for something you'll do once you're gone. However, that doesn't stop it from being a potential regret one might carry into their death. It's possible he may not even realize just how important conveying his thanks was. Maybe I'll ask him something else. Why don't you tell me about hobbies? How about hobbies? Are there any that you're going to miss? After you retire, you've got all sorts of time to pick up some hobbies. The wife and I got into gardening, but by myself I was into model kit making. I'd lay all the pieces out on the table and spend hours working with the radio going in the background. It's satisfying seeing something come out together so neatly like that. He takes on a wistful tone as his story reaches its conclusion. It's a surprisingly easy image to picture. I can't even imagine him cheerfully humming along to the radio as he works. Sounds like a big undertaking. Were you in the middle of a project when you passed on? I guess so. I was working on a 63 Corvette. Now, there's a car. I've been eyeing one for a long time. Never had the money to get it in mind. Was too busy making sure the kids had all they need. Not that I regret it for a moment. The smile I saw on those kiddos' faces were more rewarding than any shiny car could have been. Oh, that reminds me of a story when I first started working on my kits. My dear wife told her daughter Lucy that I was into making model kit building, but she didn't tell her what kind. Well, Lucy was on a work trip in Japan, and this nice treat, she brought me back some kits. He pauses not to breathe, but for dramatic effect. Only they weren't car kits. They were those fancy robot kits. Poor Lucy turned bright red when she realized her mistake. But I built those suckers too. Put them right on the shelf next to the cars. Lucy kept trying to convince me that I didn't have to do that. But when your daughter is being that thoughtful, you don't just turn up your nose. You build the darn things. Did your wife or other children purchase kits for you as well? You know it. In a few years, the garage was practically overflowing with boxes of them. I made sure to write down who gave me what so they could be the first one to see it when I finished. Use that newfangled phone camera thing that Evan taught me about. Could never get the pictures to come out quite right, but the kids always seemed excited to see the finished products. If he truly had that many, then it's not a single project that remains unfinished, but a multitude. Inconsequential though they may seem, projects like that can linger in someone's mind. It's possible that that's what's keeping him in purgatory. Maybe I'll ask him about something else. Why don't you tell me about... On second thought, better not. Seems like no matter what topic I pick, he can find a way to talk about it for hours. If given the chance, I have to take a more calculated approach. He's given me some valuable information. Now to separate the important parts from the chatter. Thank you for sharing a bit about yourself, John. You've been a delight so far. Well, thank you kindly. You've been quite the delight yourself, kiddo. Confusingly, he sounds entirely sincere when he says that. Imagine that. A spirit actually thanking me for something as banal as doing my job. Strange. You're a bit odd. I hear that all the time. Okay, judging by how those first 3 questions went, it's dangerous to let him get too caught up in any kind of tangent. I need to keep focused on what could possibly be his regret that's preventing him from moving on. He had a lot to say, but there was one thing that kept coming up. One thing that, no matter the topic, he found a way to bring attention to. Your children. John, I can't help but notice that you keep mentioning your children. Of course I do. You wanted me to tell you my story and what I would be without the pride I have for my kids. I suspect that might not be the only emotion you're carrying towards them. Now, what exactly do you mean by that? His voice is more wary than before. Unsure and uncertain, it's not an unexpected, but people don't want to admit that they have regrets they're still clinging onto. Particularly after they've already passed on. It's not pleasant realizing temporary regrets are now permanent. We've been having a pleasant conversation up to this point, correct? He pauses longer than previously. I can almost picture him attempting to untangle what I might be leading into with an opener like that. When he finally speaks, his voice is tinged with hesitancy. Can't really complain, I suppose. Shooting the breeze is always a good time, and I don't get that much chance nowadays. I'm pleased to hear that. However, I must warn you that things might become a bit more difficult from this point. The chains that hold a soul in purgatory are never light. I trust you, kiddo. It's my turn to be struck silent. I expect him to add more. A qualifier or more clarification, perhaps. But he lets that simple sentence stand by itself. Trust, huh? I clear my throat and lean back towards the microphone. John, I believe your regret is your children. His answer is immediate. You're off the mark, host. I don't have a single regret about my kids. His voice is still kind of jovial, but it's also steadfastly assured. His conviction that I'm wrong only serves to assure me I'm on the right track. But I should probably qualify my statement before I find out what John sounds like when he's upset. I apologize, I worded that poorly. I didn't mean to imply that you regret your children. It's clear from how you speak of your children that you love them deeply. But I do believe that your regret stems from them is in some way. After all the idle chatter, we're finally approaching the heart of the matter. He doesn't seem like the sort of spirit to grow violent, but I keep my guard up all the same. He's not aware of it, but he can slip back into the sea of souls rather easily if he so wishes. A few quick tugs, he'll be on his way. Now that you've got your lead, all the niceties are gone, huh? A response. That's good. We can work with that. I've been told I'm as tactless as a drunken moose let loose in a supermarket. A comparison I'm assured has actual precedent. John laughs hard and long. My shoulders relax as I sink back slightly into my chair. At least that has helped to relieve the tension. Sounds to me like your mouth is as smart as your head. Ooh-wee. If Evan and you were put in the same room, I'm not sure who would come out on top. As he mentions his children once again, John's laughter stops. For a few seconds, we're both silent, but the stalemate is broken by a gentle laugh. It's not as boisterous as John's previous laughter. It's softer and contemplative. Hmm. Guess I'm always thinking about my kids. Maybe you're onto something here, kiddo. That's not a bad thing. It means we're one step closer to helping you move on peacefully. Can't complain about that. Although, it'll be a bit sad to say goodbye to you. Host, I've been enjoying our chat. Once more I'm struck silent. But this time, by the unfettered sincerity in his voice. It's unusual to hear and, oddly enough, a bit unsettling for reasons I can't place. I clear my throat noisily. You'll excuse me for using all my tactless moose powers to steer us back to the conversation at hand. Right. I guess we don't have as much time for pleasant chatting now. You do have a show to run after all. His tone remains chipper, but there's a clear undercurrent of regret. It doesn't come as a surprise that the spirit as chatty as him is disheartened by the possibility that we may have to stop talking. Still, I can't help feeling a gentle ache that resonates along with the disappointment. It's not enough to distract me from my job, though. From previous experience, there are various angles we can approach this from. Your regret may stem from their values. Perhaps you're concerned about their values. A parent may teach their child their whole life, guide them towards what they believe to be truly important. But what is actually instilled is much harder to quantify. I pause briefly to see if he has any thoughts yet, but he remains silent as I press on. Children are always listening and watching everything you do, even long after they're no longer considered children. It's fair to be concerned about what lessons they picked up when you weren't aware you were teaching. There's silence again, but this time I allow it to settle in further. I don't push. Pleasantries are going to get to the heart of the matter. Pleasantries aren't going to get to the heart of the matter. To my surprise, he gives a gentle chuckle before he responds. Host, do you have any kids? The thought is so ludicrous that it takes me several seconds to formulate even the basic response. No, I do not. I think you'd be good with them. You talk a bit hoity-toity, but that spiel you just gave really gets to the heart of being a parent. You can talk to your own kids till you're blue in the face, but there's no way to know for sure what the lessons they're taking away. The only way to figure it out is to watch them when they don't know you're watching. And even then, you're just guessing. And what are your estimations based on what you've observed? They've learned a lot. Some good, some bad. But I'd like to think that they took the lessons I taught them to heart. His voice trails off. Once more I resort to silence, allowing John's own thoughts to fulfill in the void. If he were a different spirit, I might have had to step in. But he seems very aware of himself. If I give him space, he will come to the obvious conclusion on his own. It's not easy looking at your kids critically. Every dad wants to brag at that their kids are the best, but they're people. People aren't that easy. Everyone's got good and everyone's got bad. Kelsey is strong-willed but stubborn. Evan is smart but distant. Lucy is outgoing but selfish. He sighs deeply. It sounds as if he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. You're right, kiddo. I'm worried about the lessons I taught them. Did I really teach them well? What lessons do they carry with them, and which ones went in one ear and out the other? Will they be okay without me there to help them out? As he continues listing questions, I can tell it's time for me to step in. Questions are helpful, but when they turn into a vortex, you need someone to pull you out. That was my role. John, listen to me. I'm going to be blunt. There's no way to know for certain what values your children learned from you. Even if we were somehow able to ask them, they would likely be unable to articulate what you specifically taught them. Human lives are a messy web of influences that are nigh impossible to untangle. Can't disagree with you there. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't ways to make educated guesses. In fact, I'm fairly certain that you've been employing this tactic your entire life, even if you weren't conscious of it. I think I see where you're going with this, but I'm not gonna steal your thunder. Go for it, kid. His tone is gentle and encouraging. I can't help but wonder how many times he used that tone on his children. It feels incredibly practiced and deliberate. You observe them. Strong word, that. Observe. Perhaps you're right. Less observe and more catch a glimpses. Little things that seem inconsequential in the grand scope of things, but they point towards a greater truth. A person's values. Fair enough. But I've been watching my kids since they were the smallest little of tykes. How do you want me to narrow it down? I found myself smiling as I formulated my response. In the end, we'll make use of the very thing that had had so exacerbated me in the first place. John's love of chatter. The process will be simple and painless. I'll prompt you with a specific age range, and you tell me all the things that you observed, as much or as little as you wish to share. Sounds painless for me, but you might lose an ear from talking it off. He gives a little chuckle at his own joke, but I can tell he's intrigued. This is it. The final step. I just have to point to him the right direction and let him go. The potential loss of my ear notwithstanding, it's important that John contextualizes all the small, insignificant observations he has made over the years. I'm certain his children have carried these lessons with them and used them to shape their values. And he knows it. He just needs a bit of reminding. That's a risk I'm willing to take, John. After all, this is my job. I'll give you my worst. People won't be able to say that your show doesn't have enough talking after tonight's show. I'll tell you that. Then, let the final stories commence. Thank you for playing. Credits: Maki, character art design. (1102) The Shoreline. Hello friends, thanks for watching that video, and if you like my voice acting, you can support me by subscribing. Alright, that's it. Bye senpai!